Okay, we're in the Gemara Avodah Zarah, Daf 34. So at the end of 33, it says the Gemara qualifies the question further. When they have cracks in them, meaning glazed earthenware vessels, do not raise the dilemma, as they certainly absorb that which was placed in them and are therefore prohibited. Rather, let the dilemma be raised where they are perfectly smooth. What is the halacha in such a case? So Maremar said to them, I observe that they sweat, that is, they exude liquid from their exterior. And since they sweat, they certainly absorb, and are therefore prohibited. The Gemara asks, what is the reason that they cannot be rendered permitted by purging with hot water? It is because the Torah attested with regard to earthenware vessel that substances absorbed in it are never expelled from its walls. The Gemara reiterates its question. Maremar ruled that glazed earthenware absorbs leavened bread permanently, but he did not rule likewise with regard to wine. But in what way is leavened bread different from wine used for an idolatrous libation? Why is it that Maremar taught with regard to them all glazed earthenware vessels are permitted, even if they have contained wine of Gentiles? The Gemara adds, and if you would say that these cases are different, as leavened bread is prohibited by Torah law, whereas wine used for a libation is prohibited by rabbinic law, that is difficult. But there is a principle that all ordinances that the sages instituted, they instituted them parallel to Torah law. So it just reminds me of the commentary of the Baal HaTorim, where a lot of the commentary is seems to be demonstrations based on remez or allusions of all sorts of things in the oral tradition that it's contained in the written Torah. It's not flat out stated, but there are allusions to it in many different ways. So anyway, although this wine is prohibited by rabbinic law, it is subject to the same halachot as leavened bread. The Gemara answers, this one's use is with hot substances, and that one's use is with cold substances. So wine is drunk while it is cold, and is therefore absorbed to a lesser extent than leavened bread, which is often cooked in the vessel. So the Gemara relates, Rabbi Akiva happened to come to the city of Ginzak, whose residents asked him 3 questions to which he did not know the answer. First, does one fast for hours, or does one not fast for hours? So this is kind of like the idea of taking a fast upon yourself, like what's the minimum time? The answer to the question was not available to Rabbi Akiva. Second, are clay jars that belong to Gentiles permanently prohibited, or can they be rendered permitted? The answer was not available to him. Third, in what garments did Moses serve all 7 days of the tabernacle's inauguration? So as acting priest, when Aaron and his sons were initiated into the priesthood, Moses presumably did not wear the priestly vestments, as he himself was not a priest. So once again, the answer was not available to him. Rabbi Akiva came and asked these questions in the study hall. They said to him, the halacha is that one fasts for hours, and if he completed the fast, he prays the prayer of the fast. And the halacha is that the jars that belong to Gentiles are permitted after they have not been used for 12 months. Finally, in what garments did Moses serve during the 7 days of inauguration? He did not serve in his own clothes, nor in the regular priestly vestments, but in a special white cloak. So Rav Kahana teaches Moses served in a white cloak without a hem. The Mishnah teaches that residual grape seeds and grape skins that belong to Gentiles are prohibited. The sages taught moist grape seeds and grape skins that belong to Gentiles are prohibited, but dry ones are permitted. The Gemara asks, which are considered moist and which are considered dry? So Rav Yehuda says that Shmuel says grape residues are considered moist for all of the first 12 months after the grapes were pressed and after the first 12 months. It was stated that Rabbi Bar Bachana says that Rabbi Yochanan says when these grape residues are prohibited, one is prohibited even from deriving benefit from them. When they are permitted even with regard to consumption. So Rav Zavid says, with regard to these yeasts produced from the wine of Armenians, after 12 months of the year, they are permitted. So Rav Chaviva, son of Rava, says, with regard to these jugs that belong to Gentiles, after 12 months of the year, they are permitted. So Rav Chaviva says, with regard to these canteens belonging to Arabs, after 12 months of the year, they are permitted. So Rav Acha, son of Rav Ika, says, with regard to these Armenian grape pits, after 12 months of the year, they are permitted. Rav Acha, son of Rava, says, with regard to these brown and black jugs, After 12 months of the year, they are permitted. Okay, the Mishnah teaches that fish stew is prohibited. The sages taught fish stew prepared by an expert is permitted, as professionals do not mix wine in it. So Rabbi Yehuda ben Gamliel says in the name of Rabbi Hanina ben Gamliel, chilak, prepared by an expert, is also permitted. So Avimi, son of Rabbi Abahu, would teach fish stew prepared by an expert is permitted. He would teach this braita that he received through tradition, and then he would say its explanation. The first time and the second time that fish stew is prepared from a fish, it is permitted, but the third time it is prohibited. What is the reason? With regard to the first time and the second time, as the fish's oil is plentiful, there is no need to place wine in it. From this point forward, one might place wine in it to compensate for the insufficient fish oil. The Gemara relates that there was a certain boat carrying fish stew which came to the port of Akko, and Rabbi Abba from Akko placed guards over it to ensure that no wine would be added to the fish stew. So Rabba said to him, "Until now, who guarded it?" So Rabbi Abba said to him, "Until now, for what should we be concerned? If the problem is due to the concern that they mix wine in it, that concern is unfounded, as in the place where this fish stew was produced, a kista of fish stew sells for 1 luma, while a kista of wine sells for 4 luma. Since wine was more expensive than fish stew, there is no reason to suspect that wine was added to the stew before it reached Akko, where fish stew is sold at a higher price than wine." Upon hearing this, Rabbi Yirmiyah said to Rabbi Zarah, "But perhaps they came by means of Tyre, where wine is inexpensive and therefore likened to be added to the fish stew to increase its volume." So Rabbi Zarah said to him, "There, by way of Tyre, there was impediments in melted snow, which make travel very difficult, and the boat would not have sailed through that route." The Mishnah teaches, and cheese of Beit Unyaki is prohibited. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish says, for what reason did they prohibit deriving benefit from the cheese of Beit Unyaki? It is because most of the calves of that city are slaughtered for the sake of idol worship, and the milk curdled in their stomach contents is prohibited. The Gemara asks, why does this explanation specifically mention most calves? Even if a minority of calves were slaughtered for idol worship, this would also be reason enough. As Rabbi Meir, who is the Tana of unattributed mentions in the Mishnah, is generally concerned about a minority. The Gemara explains, if you say that the reason for the prohibition is due to the majority of calves slaughtered for idol worship, then despite the fact that the majority of animals in general used to curdle cheese are not slaughtered for idolatrous purposes, there are nevertheless a minority of animals altogether, that is, the majority of calves that are, and in this minority of calves are cause for concern, according to Rabbi Meir. So the Gemara continues, but if you say that Rabbi Meir prohibits the cheese due to a minority of calves, since there are a majority of calves that are not slaughtered for idol worship, and there are also a wider majority of the remaining animals used to curdle milk that are not slaughtered for idol worship at all, this would constitute a minority of a minority, and Rabbi Meir is not concerned for a minority of a minority. Since only a particular minority of animals used to curdle cheese, that is the calves, are ever slaughtered for idolatry, even within that group, only a minority are actually slaughtered, and even Rabbi Meir would not be concerned. So Rabbi Shimon bar Eliakim said to Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, even when calves are slaughtered for the sake of idol worship, what of it? But are you not the one who permits animals slaughtered with idolatrous intentions? As it is stated, the halakha with regard to one who slaughters an animal in order to sprinkle its blood for the sake of idol worship or to burn its prohibited fat for idol worship is subject to a dispute between Amoraim. So Rabbi Yochanan says deriving benefit from the animal is prohibited, as he holds that one can intend from one right to another right. In other words, idolatrous intent while slaughtering an animal renders it prohibited, even if the intention pertains not to the slaughter itself, but to sprinkling the blood or burning the fat. And he maintains that we derive halachot concerning intent outside the temple from the halachot concerning intent inside the temple. Since such intentions at the time of slaughter rendered an animal prohibited within the temple, they rendered it prohibited outside the temple as well with regard to idol worship. Okay. And Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish says deriving benefit from an animal is permitted. Apparently, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish holds that slaughtering an animal for the sake of idol worship does not render it prohibited. This contradicts his previous assertion that it is prohibited to derive benefit from calves that have been slaughtered for the sake of idol worship. So Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish said to Rabbi Shimon bar Eliakim, may your fortune be auspicious. The case here is where one says that he is worshiping the idol at the conclusion of the slaughter. Since the act of slaughtering itself is an act of worship, the calf is rendered prohibited immediately. The Mishnah teaches that Rabbi Yehuda said, Rabbi Yishmael asked Rabbi Yehoshua a series of questions. The Gemara notes that Rav Achavdevoi says that Rav says, with regard to one who betroths a woman by giving her the excrement of an ox that is to be stoned, the woman is betrothed, provided the excrement was worth 1 peruta. Although no benefit may be derived from the ox itself, it is permitted to derive benefit from its excrement. But if one attempts to betroth her with the excrement of calves that were used as offerings of idol worship, she is not betrothed, as even their excrement is forbidden. The Gemara remarks, if you wish, propose logical reasoning, and if you wish, cite a verse to substantiate this claim. The Gemara elaborates, if you wish, propose logical reasoning. With regard to calves used for idol worship, a calf's additional girth derived from the excrement stored in its body is satisfactory for the worshipper, as fatter animals are more impressive offerings. Since the excrement is part of the offering, it is also forbidden. But with regard to an ox that is to be stoned, its additional girth is not satisfactory for the owner, as he gains nothing from it. If you wish, cite a verse. It is written here with regard to an animal used for idol worship, quote, and there shall cleave not of the designated thing to your hand, Deuteronomy 13:18, which indicates that the entire animal is forbidden. And it is written there with regard to an ox to be stoned, the ox shall be stoned, and its flesh shall not be eaten, Exodus 21:28. This teaches that its flesh is forbidden, but its excrement is permitted. So Rava said, we learned both of these halachot from the Mishnah. He elaborates from the fact that Rabbi Yehoshua said to Rabbi Yishmael that cheese of Gentiles is prohibited because they curdle it in the stomach contents of an unslaughtered animal carcass. One can derive the halacha of the excrement of an ox that is to be stoned. The reason is that Rabbi Yishmael responded to Rabbi Yehoshua, but isn't the stomach of a burnt offering subject to more stringent halacha than the stomach of an unslaughtered animal carcass? And yet, although one may not derive benefit from the stomach of a burnt offering ab initio, if one did derive benefit from it, he is not liable for misuse of property consecrated to the temple. And that is the end of Daf 34.